Well, here we go. I have my sister-in-law, Katy Merrell, with me today on the podcast. Welcome, Katy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this to be able to sit down and the fact that this is even something that's happening, that's even possible. When I think about my younger brother Landon, and the fact that you guys have been married, just over a year and a half or so. I mean, kind of coming up
Yeah,
on that now.
you're in 3 months. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm just we Merrill men tend to kind of like sometimes numbers just they get
Hey,
all
that's okay. That's all right. Year and a half. We'll round up.
But what a joy to get to have you on the podcast and to be, um, within the last 2 years or so, more than a little over 2 years. That because thinking back to the time that Landon began to talk about you and introduce us to you and the idea of you, the fact that you have made such an impact on my life as a family and an impact on our family in the short amount of time that you've been in our lives. It feels like you have been a part of our lives for a very long time. Like,
Thank you.
yeah,
Feels the same for me.
yeah, the way that you've come in and very much so are a part of the family. But just so cool to get to have you. I know you are in a different state. So what I'll do
Mhm.
is I'll have people for people that don't know you, which might be a decent amount of the audience here.
Sure.
But they may know of or may know my brother Landon from some capacity. This is going to be really cool, I think, for people because a lot of them you don't know, you haven't had the opportunity to get to know you in any way yet, outside of those that are kind of closer to your circle.
Yeah.
And so for them to get a little bit of that snapshot of what I've gotten to experience and just get to know you, I just can't wait for that to happen through this. So will you take a second, kind of like just give a snapshot to the who you are,
Okay.
where you're at, and kind of like what you're doing in this season of life, so people can
Okay.
just kind of get caught up a little bit with who Katy Merrill is.
Okay. So, Katy Merrell. I live in Calabasas, California, with my husband Landon, your brother,
Yeah.
and yeah, we are just living life out here, loving it. We're about 15 minutes from the beach, so it's awful.
It's gotta be miserable most days.
Miserable. So great. I love it. It's been really fun. It's been a fun season. Over the last year, I'm sure we'll get into this more, but over the last year, I kind of took a venture out of my normal work. And started my own business. And so took the leap and started my own bakery. So that's kind of been what I've been up to the last year almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just had an opportunity to venture out and find my strengths and definite weaknesses within that. And just kind of testing the limits of what I want to do in that space and what I can do.
Yeah.
We're in a 1-bedroom apartment, very grateful, very thankful.
Sure.
But there's only so much you can do working out of the home and having a home kitchen. So it's been a big learning curve, definitely. So Landon's working full time. I'm working full time. It's weird to say, like, this is my job because it's been a dream of mine for so long. Never really thought that I could do it as my job. It was always something in the back of my mind that would be something, I get married, I have kids grow up. Okay, I'm in my 50s, now I can do a bakery.
Sure.
Now I can do my passion. And then I met your brother and he is like, you should do your passion now before kids. And, see number one, if you like it, and if not, you can pivot from there. But, just go for it. He's like, what are you going to spend your whole life doing a job you don't enjoy and always wondering? So, he's kind of given me the strength to take the leap. And I'm so glad he did.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I want to just unpack more of the baking and that journey in just a bit too. But before jumping into that more, would you kind of give your perspective on like again in somewhat of a nutshell, but like you can share as much as you want. Like there's no rules on this podcast in regards to time frames and all of whatever else. But like just like how did you land it? Like how did this happen? How did you like? What was the kind of the beginnings of that world to be, the kind of the origin story of the two of you from your perspective? Because again, some of the people that have known Landon, they've heard it from his side or whatever, or seen it, but like to hear from, his wife's reaction perspective, I think would be pretty cool for you.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we start? Yeah. So I was single, had a friend getting married. Her and I knew each other from college about, admittedly, 8 years prior. And her and I had stayed in touch, phone call once or twice every year. But she said, hey, like, I'm getting married and I feel like you really should come. I'm like, okay. And I'm living up in Washington at the time. And she said, but it's in Hawaii. And I'm like, oh, it's in Hawaii. Okay. Well, that sounds great. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this wedding. It's in Hawaii. It was still in the COVID time where you had to get tested and do all the things for flights, where it's like, okay, if you land here, you have to time it right to still be able to have your test be valid. And I'm like, okay, so there was more pressure to that. And so she definitely was like, I know it's a lot, but you should do it. I was like, okay. So a couple months before the wedding, I was down in California. It's where she lived, lives now, but lived at the time. And I was down here for a different friend's bridal shower. And we had lunch and she said, hey, are you like looking to meet anybody, or are you like content being single? How are you feeling? And I said, I'm really content being single. I think I'm okay. I don't feel like I have to be with anybody right now. I'm kind of enjoying where the Lord has me right now. Yeah. And she said, well, if I had somebody, would you be interested? And I said, I guess so. And she showed me his picture, told me his name, and I didn't remember either of them, which is not like me. I'm usually like a names to face like person, and I usually can remember things pretty well. But yep, completely spaced it. So a couple months later, flew to Hawaii, got there, stayed with her and a couple other girlfriends of hers that I hadn't met. One was her sister, and so stayed with these girls I didn't know, and quickly formed a friendship. And it just immediately was comfortable. I was like, oh, these people are really cool. This is going to be fun. And day of the wedding, we were all helping set up, and Landon walks up to me and introduces himself. He's like, hey, I'm Landon. Like, do you need any help? Because I was carrying palm branches for, I don't know, we were helping decorate, before it all started. So I was like, oh, nice to meet you. Nope, I'm good. And just kind of walked off, not really realizing that I kind of blew him off a little bit. That's still a conversation we have every now and then. But
it kept him,
right. Okay, I gotta keep him humble a little bit. He's a little too confident coming out the gate. Yeah. No. So then the ceremony happened. It poured down rain, and they say, oh, if it rains in Hawaii, like, it's only momentarily, or at least it's warm. It lasted the whole ceremony, and everybody was soaked. But it was probably one of the most beautiful weddings I'd ever been to. Like, the pictures were gorgeous. We were all in it together, huddling together with strangers that we didn't know. And anyway, the ceremony was great. And after that, went up to where the reception was held under this big grand tent, and tried to find my seat. I'm looking at the seating chart. And I'm like, oh, there's the table. Okay, my name's on it. And I'm like, all the other names are guys, just guys. And so I go to the table. They're all single dudes. And then me. And I was like, well, this was obvious. Nice. I'm like, that was super low key. Like, she just planned this all completely. And your brother, everybody's filling in their seats, and he came up and just smacked the seat right next to me so loud that it startled me, and I jumped, and he's like, oh, is this seat taken? Can I sit here? And I was like, no, that's fine. Go ahead. So all that to say, it was kind of from there, we just we just hit it off. We just were having normal conversation. It felt like, it just felt natural. I remember at one point we're sitting there looking at each other, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here showing him pictures of my nieces and nephews. Like, he knows who they are. Like, oh yeah, okay, here. Well, let's just catch up for a minute. Okay, here's my nieces and nephews, blah, blah, blah. And he's doing the same with me. And I'm like, why is this so easy? Why is this so comfortable? Especially at a wedding where you don't know anybody. I knew the bride, and that was it. And in my heart, it felt like I've known him for my whole life, but I just found him. I was like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Like, there you are, kind of a feeling in my heart. and
Huh.
I'd never felt that before. It was just really cool. It was really, um, just really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then from there, we spent the next couple days getting to know each other, and a few people stayed back in Hawaii and just kind of enjoyed like the beaches and things like that. He took me to the airport, and just him, and I was like, oh, okay, like this should be fun. And I'm a talker. It's not unknown by anybody who knows me that I like to have conversation, probably a little too much. But I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
It's like
He was,
you met your match.
I
You
bet my
met.
match. I was like, who is this guy? I'm sitting there like, oh, wow, okay, all right, he can talk. And he just told me all about his life. You know, whatever he could in 45 minutes, he was telling me. He was telling
Yeah.
me about, you know, his brother, his mom, dad, his cousins, his job, his passions in life. He opened up with talking about his faith. Like, first and foremost, he was like, this is what I believe. This is what I want, like, for my future. And I was like, oh, all right. And, you know, I wasn't like, oh gosh, get me out of this car. When are we going to get there? I was like, this guy's really cool. Like, I love this. You know, he's not wasting any time. Because at the time, again, I was living in Washington. He was living down here in California. So I think he saw the opportunity and saw that it was like, well, I may never get another chance to talk to her again,
Yeah.
just because distance wise.
Sure.
So
He's
shoot my
shooting-
shot
he's
and like,
shooting his shot.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
shooting
just
his
like
shot.
go for it.
Yeah.
So, and I was intrigued. And so we got there and he's like, hey, would it be cool if I called you sometime? And I was like, yeah, I would love that. So the rest is kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
history
Yeah.
from there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so cool to hear it from your perspective in the, you know, and obviously I know that part of that story and have heard it, but just to hear it again and see the way you know you receive some of like Landon's like confidence that or swagger or potential
yeah,
swagger to come in and be like, this is me. And
right.
you know, and he was in a season, you know, in that and in part of his life where in a similar way that you mentioned, kind of like being single and being kind of content, not necessarily looking for a relationship. He was in that
Yeah.
same kind of space of like, you know what, like I'm not, you know, I'm good now in coming out of a
Yeah.
different relationship and things. And so knowing that he just was himself, and then probably pretty quickly was like, well,
Yeah.
okay, I'll you know, even though I'm good being single, like I shouldn't miss this opportunity if it could be
Yeah.
potentially just cool as so it's a couple things when I think about, you know, who you are that I've already gotten to experience from, you know, a brother-in-law seat. I freaking love my brother. Like, you know, most of those that would know me and know us, like they know that's true. That is no fabrication or um, ex, uh, exaggeration to that
Hmm.
statement and belief. Like I
Yeah.
feel really blessed that like I get to have that kind of relationship. And he's, you know, my only sibling, and so there's and 2 years apart, like there's just a lot in that. But there's been this journey with both of us throughout our whole lives of that, like our future wife conversation and family and getting married one day and all of that. And so it's been such a huge part of the thing we have thought about, prayed about, dreamed about, cared about, you know, prepared for, worked hard towards, worked for saving, all these different things
Hmm.
about who we are and all that stuff. It just was and then there was this season where we both I stepped into that a little earlier, and it was a little bit longer for what he I think had wanted to be able to
Yeah.
get to experience. And there was this time frame, you know, where the wonder of like, is there gonna be somebody, Lord, that you really do bring that like hits it? Because, you know, Landon is an incredible man, obviously, as you know, but there were also like just not a ton of women that like saw the reasons that were really worth that for really who he was in so many of the right ways. And so when things just didn't work out, or he realized like this isn't the person for me, you know, that just continued to be that like, is there somebody there like that's
Mm.
gonna be that's gonna love the same stuff at the level they need to, like have the same moral, faith-filled like values that I do for life. And there was a lot of deep valleys in that
Hmm.
that I remember walking with him and being like, just dude, like there. I mean, God has got somebody that is going to come up and be better than you can anticipate, and not like just like the one or like that, because I don't believe
Hmm.
in that world that like I used to, but just I did not doubt, and yet I felt the discouragement and the
Sure.
valley, right? And so
Yeah.
when you came into the picture and he began to talk about you, and the way his eyes lit up, his voice lit up, I mean, all of who Landon was got magnified in the best way when he began to go, there's this girl named Katie. And so the way that I like listened in and was like begin to have like a hope that maybe like God's doing something here, um, was just fun and also nerve wracking because I'm like, all right, like I don't
Yeah.
want to get my hopes up either, like
Yeah.
because this girl seems incredible, and
Mm.
I hope she can see like some of those things that are just so incredible about who he is and value them the way that they need to be valued, love him for him, and um, all of those things, and just like I hope it, I hope I hope it can happen. And so the
Hmm.
fact that I'm sitting here tonight, like I can't understate, just the journey that the Lord has brought both of you on to be to where you are. And
Yeah.
um and so it would be one thing too, like if you just like were a great compliment and match for my brother and loved him well and all that. But the way that that's happening, but then you, like I mentioned at
Mm.
the beginning of the conversation, have integrated into just being a part of our family in a way that was like it just seems like it was supposed to be from the beginning. Um, will you talk about just even a little bit of like that piece of
Hmm.
the the family integration, right? Like there's
Yeah.
people listening that um have been married for a while, or they're even going to be married soon, and like just the dynamic of like family adjustments and like how to step into a world where you're like, okay, you've got all these different things in your family that you've been raised with or whatever else, like, and your experience in the last couple, year and a half or so, 2 years being kind of around us, like what has been some of your experience, because it's unique. Like I have Holly,
Yeah.
obviously, and then you, who are able to
Yeah.
bring the like, okay, Merrill family, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like we're here. Um, and just I'd like would love to just hear some of your perspective about what it's been like integrating into the family side of things, for people
Yeah.
that are even maybe in that season for their own marriages or potential marriages.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that I will say about in thinking of your in-laws or the family of your in-laws, if you're not there yet and you haven't gotten married or you're not even dating anybody or, whatever that is, if you're not there yet, pray for your in-laws, pray for the family that God has for you, potentially has for you in the future. Super important. I think, he knows the desires of our heart. And, I think it's just super important to be praying specifically for certain things, because it's definitely affected my life. And, when I met your parents for the first time, that was when we all went down to California. Landon had his release
Yes,
party that he was
album
doing
album
and
release party.
album release party. If y'all haven't heard it,
Daydream Kid. Peep
that's
it on
right. Shout out.
Spotify.
Yep, that's right. And it just, it felt like I was talking to my parents. Like I was like, oh, like I was a little nervous, for a
Sure.
good reason.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, what if they don't like me? All the things that you wonder, going into it. And I was married previously, so I'm walking into it with a different lens of like, oh, are they going to think like, oh, she's been married before, like she's tainted, or these
Sure.
other expectations that I didn't know if they would have or not,
Sure.
were real, worries for me,
Yeah.
deep in my heart. And I had to come to the conclusion that, you know what, if it's meant to be, if they're meant to like me, if I'm meant to be in this family, like we can have those conversations.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be bad conversations or uncomfortable conversations. They can be just openness if that feels necessary. So it was definitely comfortable. I wasn't scared after we all started talking about, the big gray cloud, or however that can be thought of, and it didn't seem scary. It didn't seem weird. It was like, hey, this is what I went through. I'm here now by the grace of God, and
Yeah.
he has so redeemed so many different aspects of my life, and I give him all the glory for that. But it's just one of those things where walking into your family and like joining your family was one of the easiest things I've ever done, in terms of they're so welcoming to probably a stranger, but like to their son. Their other son is married, they have grandkids, and then they have this other son that has just been wanting that for his whole life. And, big shoes to fill, if you will. It's like they have this expectation of like, um, they want to love their daughter-in-law. And I'm like, am I worthy of that? Like, they're really great people, and it's just been really, really fun. Like meeting you, meeting Holly, meeting the kids, like being around them feels so natural. Being around you all feels so natural to me. And it's just been so fun to see, like, when we first met, we're still getting to know each other. There was an opportunity where I was in Washington and Landon had come up to visit me over Father's Day, and your parents were in the process of moving to Arizona. And they're like, oh, we're on a road trip. We happen to be going through Washington where you live. And I was like, what? Like, that's random. I'm like, was this planned? I don't know. I don't think it was. But my mom was just like, oh, invite him to a barbecue we're having for Father's Day. And I was like, okay, like we've only known each other for 4 weeks, like 5 weeks, maybe. Like, it was pretty early on. And so they showed up. My parents went out to greet them. I think I was like fixing my hair probably in the bathroom. I don't know. And before Landon and I could even walk out the door to get out there, I just remember like looking, and I'm like, are they hugging? Oh yeah, everybody's hugging. Okay. All right. Landon and I are like, okay, we're walking out there. And then I'm like, are some of them crying? Like, he and I both remember like them being emotional about this moment of meeting. And I'm like, what is happening? So, I mean, you'd have to ask them their perspective on it. Maybe they were like, Katie, we weren't crying. But that's what I remember, is like it being an emotional moment. And it was just so cool. They hit it off. Like, they've known each other forever. Now they talk about vacationing together. Like, it's everything that you would want. And no relationship is perfect. Let me just say that to the people that are out there and they're like, I can't stand my in-laws. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I get that. But there's just something in the power of redemption that God can do. He can work a lot of things. And he can heal a lot of things. And maybe it's a posture, for me, maybe it was a posture of my heart that I had to work through. And, I just feel like it was just a special moment, to see that. And it's just, joining the family hasn't been something that was as difficult as I thought it was going to be, because I felt so comfortable with Landon, like I've known him forever. Yeah. It made it easy to converse with y'all, because I feel like I've known you guys for years, a lot more years than it's actually been. So
yeah, it's so good. It seems rare. It seems rare. It seems special. It seems like there's definitely a supernatural side of it. Not to over spiritualize this at all, but to be very clear, like there's a God grace that's in a lot of this. That's, I think, helped its cohesion and its like its connectivity and redemption and all of that. In the mentioning of the previous season, that before getting married to Landon, there's I know people listening that when they think about heartache and heartbreak and difficult seasons, and the thought of like, I may never get to experience what my heart longs for based on something that has not worked out or whatever the way that I thought before. What would you say to somebody that may be in that space, that's like has gone through something really difficult in that way, but is kind of that wondering of like, am I ever gonna be able to experience that? And again, I don't want to put feelings or words in your mouth, but watching you experience what I can see to be, from at least my seat, like some pretty incredible stuff in life in a new season. That I wonder what somebody who went through difficult things would say, as you could speak into somebody that's like, I just don't even know. Like, is it possible? Is it possible to actually like experience kind of like light at the end of that tunnel, if you will? And if you were to give them some insight to that, like, or some encouragement to that, like, what would come to the top of your heart and mind when you would be like somebody that's in that season? You're like, if I could give them sit down with a cup of coffee, like this is part of what I would say to a version.
Definitely. Yeah. One of the biggest moments that I think of is when that time was, still working through the divorce process. I remember going and visiting my grandpa, and my grandmother had passed away about 2 years prior. Um, and I remember just he and I sitting there crying together. It was just this emotional, we were both dealing with loss, the death of a spouse, the death of a marriage, the death of expectations, the death of that, that you thought either it wouldn't happen or like that's something that was not in your plan. And it's super painful. He immediately gave me the Bible verse, Isaiah 61:3, I believe it is. And he will give unto them who mourn in Zion beauty for ashes. And that verse stuck with me, and just, it gave me strength on the days that I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I don't even want to get up. I was like, no, like my grandpa has taught me, like, we get up, we go, we do the things, we pray, we like give our day to the Lord. And that verse just really impacted me. And I've just carried it with me ever since, but I definitely took the time to go through the healing process. None of it's perfect, but I had a mentor that was helping me through counseling, and she was wonderful. She just always brought me back to the Lord. It was one of those things where she guided me, but then she also kind of let me figure it out, which I feel like a lot of times when you go through something that is very difficult, or even traumatizing experiences people have had, they go to therapy or they go to counseling and they're not allowed to grieve the way that their body's like telling them to grieve. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yep.
And a lot of it was me just talking out kind of how I was feeling and where I felt the Lord was leading me next. And I took a lot of drives by myself. I'm a type of person where I get stressed out or overwhelmed. I like to drive to kind of clear my head, and had a special spot that I would drive to on this mountain and just overlook the city that I was living in and just blare my worship music with the windows down and not even care if a car drove by. Like, that was my healing process, was like, okay, Lord, like, I'm just sitting here crying. I can't even sing the words to this song, and I hurt and I'm in pain. And I hate where I'm at right now. Like, why is this happening to me? And it calmed me. Like, it enabled me to be angry, but not, hurt anybody in the process.
Yeah.
And just sit in it. Just like, be like, Lord, will you just be with me in this? Because I'm in pain and I don't know what to do. Full brokenness, full vulnerability. And my family got to see that and got to experience all of what that can look like. And, it wasn't all pretty.
Yeah.
But, it was one of those things where then they came into this next relationship being very guarded and being very protective.
Sure.
As any family probably would be, is like, oh, like, we're really protective of her heart. We have these other expectations, even if they could be different than mine. They're there to love and protect. That's what a family is, to do. And, I would just say that if you have the opportunity to grieve that season, give that season exactly what it needs. And if you don't, a lot of the time it can keep coming up and kind of affect the trajectory of where God might be leading you. And not to say that things won't come up in the next relationship. They will. They for sure will. Landon and I have worked through some things that I'm like, oh, that was a thing from the past. Sorry about that. Or that's one of my insecurities. That's very obvious. Okay. All right. How can we move past this or work through it? So, and don't be, being scared of that will hold you back. I think just giving in to I'm not in control of this. Like, God has a plan for my life. As overused as that may sound, there's a plan for everything. There is a release and a relief that you feel when you actually believe it and you just let it go. You just get to breathe and get to say, Lord, this is, I want what you want. That's what I would repeat is okay, Lord, I don't even know what I want, but I guess whatever you want, it's probably what's best, Yeah. So, definitely clinging to a scripture verse or 2 or 3 that are in the back of your mind. The memorization of scripture, my mom has always taught me, is really important, because in good times, in bad times, we find it a lot of the time. I'll speak for myself. I find myself listening to worship music or repeating a Bible verse in my head when I'm in a good mood. I'm like, la, 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 like going about my day, having a great day, doing great, listening to worship music, feeling like I'm, doing great.
Yeah.
And then in the dark times, I'm like, oh, I do that a lot less, So if you do study scripture and you do have those things in the back of your mind, if they're written on your heart, like it will be so much easier to immediately turn to the Lord. And I'm not perfect at this, please let me tell you, at all, but I'm learning and growing, and have just noticed that has been the quicker way out of the dark times, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
good. So good. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for just your vulnerability there. And just know a lot of people are going to be really encouraged and challenged. Just the tons of wisdom and humility in that. But one of the things that has been such a cool gift for me personally, aside from my brother having an incredible wife and starting a family like with his own, Merrill, world, is the way that I've watched my wife get to have a sister for the first time. Holly has a younger brother named Sean, who's actually on the podcast before a couple episodes back, and they have a great relationship. But the never having a sister, and I think that there was also this like up to meeting you, the like how who's landing in Marion is like, are we gonna all be able to jive? And like Holly is she is strong, and she is confident in the things of like, man, where she wants to go, what she's doing, and the convictions in her heart, and there's like, she doesn't, how do I describe it, she's like, we're on a little bit of different ends of the spectrum when it comes to like giving love out. So like what I mean by that is like, you don't have to earn it with her, but like she doesn't just like whoever it is, like it's like, like there's got to be some weight to it. It really does have to mean something, right? Like whether it's love or respect.
It's not frivolous.
Right.
Yeah.
I can give love and not even think about it to everybody. And it's to a fault, right? But so we're on those ends of the spectrum. And there was this like, I just knew like the Lord was going to have to bring, and obviously God is still transforming and shifting and changing both of us in our own journeys and growth and all of that. So this is not to say there's our own stuff we want to keep working through when it comes to that. But there was this sense of like, God, you're going to have to bring somebody into this picture that's like Holly is going to respect and like be able to come into that and be like, have the admiration, love, and ability to resonate and connect with, like that's not going to just be this uphill battle, because the longing of my heart was being able to have this relationship with my brother and his bride, where it wasn't like those sitting around the table awkward and can't figure out how to connect because we just don't talk the same language. We know when it comes to life, and yet understand all of that's overcomable. Again, people that are in those situations, like it's the Lord can help and do all that. But all of that to say, like to watch my wife just fall in love with you as a person and as a sister-in-law to the world, that for her has been something that she hasn't experienced really before, has been so cool. And she loves you, and she likes you, and that's a big deal. And just the way that it's already impacted her, like she wants to spend time with you. Like she's like, how do we do more of that? And we've gotten some of those moments, this last spring, earlier in the year, we got to spend more time with the family and with you guys out in Tennessee, which was so huge. But that's just been a cool gift for me that like I don't know I was expecting to get the way we've already got it at this point. And so and I will say too, like it takes a special ability to come in and be able to do that too. Like your confidence and security in who you are, to come in and not feel like you're competing, or when it comes to, right, because like there's an established, if you will, daughter-in-law. Right.
You guys have been married for 10 years and then dating before that,
So that
well established.
There can be a lot of those insecurities that I think that could have been like bred in the enemy to take and go like, yeah, you have to like try to, I don't know. And you didn't have I mean, there was not an ounce of that. It was just like, hey, I'm here. I want to get to know you. I want to be,
Yeah.
um, invested in just their own relationship, and just so cool. This is a huge testament to you, and I think the excitement that I have in my heart to continue to see those relationships between the four of us and our families and things continue to just get to grow. I cannot wait for it
Oh
because
yeah.
we
No,
have a lot.
I tell my friends, I tell people I don't even know that when they're like, oh, like, how are the in-laws? They're like, it's usually strangers that ask, like, oh my gosh, you're newly married. How are the in-laws? I'm like,
Yeah,
listen, I hit the in-law jackpot.
yeah,
My brother-in-law is great. My sister-in-law is great. And I'm not just saying that because this is a podcast,
yeah,
like genuinely, like I
yeah,
actually enjoy all of you. You
yeah,
know, Marco Polo has made it an easier way to stay in touch, especially
yeah,
with you guys and the kiddos and like,
yeah,
you know, your mom. And, you know, it's
yeah,
just made it a great gateway to be able to message each other, talk at each other. You know, on your own time or when you're
yeah,
available. And
yeah,
I know Holly's super busy. She is like such a great and fierce, loving woman.
yeah,
And I just remember when I met her, I'm like, she's a powerhouse. Like
yeah,
she's awesome.
yeah,
And I want to learn more about her. Like
yeah,
she's so cool. So it's just, I'm glad you feel that way about me because I feel that way about you guys. So
yeah, yeah.
otherwise this could be awkward.
Yeah, no, it is. It's been so cool, and yeah, just excited to see that world continue to get to develop and deepen. What I've got to hear some of your perspective on, kind of coming in towards the end of the conversation, but just kind of coming into some of the land inside of things that, like, when I think about, and this also will tie back even into baking and some of those things that
Mm,
have been dreams and passions that have been in you for a while, but maybe laid dormant for for a while, but to this last season. My so Landon he's a dreamer. He is that, like, what, we could do this, like, we should
mm-hmm.
try, and why not, and like just up in the clouds and beyond. It has been since he was a kid, like a little kid, and
Yeah.
it's one of the most beautiful things about who he is. It's just that piece of him where he has the ability to see, to have the vision for something that some people are like just can't even conceive, whether it's literally like his creativity in the writing and creating world
Right.
of video and movie and script and story writing and storytelling, or um, it's just the idea of uh, just the future, and just the dreams and the ideas of like what could be, and down the road in his
Mm-hmm.
life. He's always been that dreamer, and
Mm-hmm.
even in his album release of his stage name, or if you will,
Right.
of Daydream Kid. It really is that, like,
Right.
kind of ode to like that piece of him, just kind of always thinking about that space, and and I have been so challenged by that, over the course of my life, because of how busy and how obviously stressful and weighty life can and does get. But I do think at times, to his point that you mentioned earlier about the baking side, um, I think a lot of people and a lot of us uh, are stuck in something we don't even actually need to be stuck in. But there's the belief that, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, we can't until we're 50, like you said, or we
Sure.
can't until, like. And Landon has just been one of those guys that's like, no, let's try it now. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what tomorrow holds. So, like, might as well see if this is something that we should. And I just freaking love that about him, and how that's grown, right? Because it's inspired people, and it hasn't, in his world, always materialized into whatever he hoped or wanted it to be. But the fact that
Yeah.
he tried is
Mm-hmm.
more than most people, and
Sure.
I respect the heck out of that. How has it, just being married to a dreamer and some
Mm-hmm.
of those things, impacted you in what I want to kind of hear the, not both sides, but like the positives, and even like some of
Mm-hmm.
the challenges, because
Yeah.
again, people may be listening to this that have that situation in their relationship or their marriage, or they're like they're navigating what that could look like.
Yeah.
And how has that been for you, from the, like, how it's inspired or challenged you in a good way, or how it's been challenging maybe in some of the other ways that you were learning how to navigate? um and I'm just curious because it's my brother, and I'm just like, how are you doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that about Landon as well. As you know, it's one of those things that's super inspiring. And when I met him, I could tell that about him. I'm like, oh, he
Yeah,
goes for things. He's like,
yeah,
he's not just a talker. He's a dreamer with with ambition and with action behind it.
Yeah.
He'll go for the things, he'll do the things, even if he feels like this might not be the right season. He's like, well, I'm going to pray on it, and then I'm probably going to do it. I'm like, okay. And so it is inspiring because my background, I did go to baking school, graduated from that, and then decided, I should probably have a degree in something that can actually get a job, was my mentality.
Sure.
So I ventured and took a hard left to a couple different things, but ended up getting my bachelor's degree in speech pathology. And so I worked as a speech therapy assistant in Washington for about 3 years, loved it. And further background was restaurant management, restaurant, coffee shop, hosting, serving, bartending, the whole gamut of, fast-paced, quick, working with people, which I loved. I absolutely loved it. And the speech therapy side, I also helped manage the clinic that I was at. So I've kind of always been in this, like, I want to go up to management and like make sure I can be a leader or, help point people in the right direction and help people out where I can. And really, really loved it. And then I met your brother and I was like, I got to move to California. So this is going to take another left turn. Yeah. And was able to come down here and get a job at a med spa, being the director of a clinic down here, and which I'd never done before. I'd never worked in a med spa. Like, that was so random, but wasn't random because there were just a lot of relationships that I formed and friendships that I built that were so amazing, and loved that season. This is a long story short, okay. But it was something where I knew, okay, I have my degree in the back of my mind. I can always go back to doing speech therapy if I want to. Baking wasn't really even a thought because I had pushed it so far back. I was like, no, that's not a thing. And I just remember I got an order from somebody that wanted me to do cupcakes. And I was like, oh, yeah, because I had mentioned like, oh, yeah, I bake. And she's like, well, I'll order cupcakes from you. And I'm like, okay, great. Made them, loved it. She loved them. I loved doing it. And Landon was like, this is your passion, right? Like, why don't you do this? And I'm like, because I can't. Like, I have to stay in the box. Like, I have to follow the rules. I have to have a 9 to 5. Like, I got to do this. And then when I can retire, then I can do what I want to do. And he's like, what are you talking about? That's not, he's like, first of all, that's not our generation. Like, nobody's really doing that anymore. Not that it's bad. A lot of people just aren't doing that and taking more of an entrepreneurial stance on how they want to do life. And I'm like, that's scary. I don't think I can do that. He's like, you can. Let's do it. And, long story short, I did it. And I was like, okay, like, we're going to do this. I'm going to take the leap. And this is really scary because there's not income with this. And we're going to have to trust like a lot. And, it is a very scary thing. The most vulnerable parts, I would say, for me were the fact that I have realized how much of a perfectionist I am. And when I've had jobs as a manager or I've, had jobs in restaurants, I'm like, let's go. This is all on a timeline. This is all on a schedule. We got to keep the pace. But when it comes to my own work, I'm like, setting a schedule is hard. Why is this hard for me? I've always had to do this in any other job, but the application has just been the more difficult part for me. So, and where do I spread? Am I spreading myself too thin? Am I not taking on enough clients? Like, what am I doing? Figuring it all out. Honestly, not having someone to lay it out for me has been the harder part. And I'm just having to learn, we've got a lovely dry erase board here that's helping us organize our life. Yeah. And, I've been blessed with, mainly like 2 orders a week since I quit my job, at least. And so the last couple of weeks have been my busiest weeks, which has been just a total provision from the Lord. Yeah. And that was a year ago that I started this journey. So,
and you you quit your job,
yeah,
and stepped into this,
yeah,
with that pretty large faith step to go, okay, I really will. I give this a shot and kind of learn as I go to what it's going to take and require to make this thing happen. And right. I mean, so like that was significant. It wasn't just to like you started to do it and like kind of to see how it would go with continuing. Work. Like that was a big jump.
Yeah, it was a big jump. Yeah, like you said, it wasn't like I was easing myself into it for 6 months and then like, oh, maybe I can, maybe I can't. It was like I had one order and then I was like, oh my gosh, I loved that so much. And Landon's like, do it. I was like, okay. And then I'm like, what did I just do?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
quit my job. Like, am I crazy? Like, felt like I was crazy a lot of the time for the next couple months. But it was also really cool. What your brother did was he was like, hey, this season doesn't have to look a specific way you want it to. Like, I'd never not had a job. So he's like, I know this is going to be really weird for you, but like, maybe you should chill and just not be working. And I'm like, what? Like, that stressed me out more. Cause I was like, well, I have to be contributing to our family. Like, I have to do this and this and this. He's like, you don't have to do anything. He's like, so how about you take the full month of October off, or September and October? He's like, you just take those 2 months off. We ended up visiting some friends in Georgia, and it was the most relaxing time, like vacation I'd ever had in general, just because I didn't have to plan for time off or, things like that. Not that that's bad, but it just, for me, I was like, oh, I didn't even know what this felt like. And it just was so like reestablished what I really wanted to do. And I was like, oh, this can be my passion and my job, and I can love it. And so, with the start of the new year, I kind of got my feet underneath me and then kind of just started picking up more and more out of, beyond that. And it hasn't all been perfect. And I would probably say that I'm like still learning how to plan things, how to, get my schedule perfect. But there's been a lot of nights that I'm up till 2 a.m. and I'm like, how am I still decorating these cookies? How am I still decorating these cupcakes? But the perfectionist side kind of takes over to where I'm spending like so much time. And Landon's helped me out with that. He's like, hey, it looks great. Like, walk away. It doesn't have to be perfect, or it does look perfect to me. So just chill. So I'm learning to kind of release that and just like trust the time that I've had in baking school, trust the gift that I believe God's given me, trust that it's gonna go where it's supposed to go. So it's been fun. It's been a roller coaster in some seasons, but overall it's been, I couldn't do it without your brother. Like, absolutely not. I could never have done it without Landon and his vision, and his dream for me is to live my dream. So I'm like, I've never been in that position where you're like supporting me to the full extent of like, whatever you want it to look like, you just go for it. And I'm here to support you. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, it's really cool.
When I think about the two of you as a couple, there's a few things that really stand out, but one of the things that's up there pretty high is, and I just don't see it often, is the way the two of you so believe in each other and the dreams and passions that God has placed on your heart. Like, the way he's like, oh yeah, all in. Like, baking. Like, I'm watching you, Katy, like, come alive and like experience joy with this, and you're really good at it. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's go. Like, and then the way, like, even to we alluded to the album release, thing he did when you guys met and we're kind of starting to date. Like, you showed up and you just were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, he's worked hard on this, and like, we're celebrating, a job that he put in a lot of time and money and energy and all of that, whatever. So that all the other, video things of the last, all of it, you are just, and you advocate for each other and really genuinely believe in each other mutually, where I don't see a lot of marriages that have a healthy balance in that, and it's not necessarily like this balance where it's like it's both the same at all times.
Right.
It's knowing kind of like when one needs to step back a little bit to let the other one have more of the whatever, the stage, or the platform, or the energy, or the whatever. And I just have watched you guys even in the last 2 years be together and do that so well, and it's genuine. Like, you're not doing it for anybody else. And it's so cool to see that that's possible. I think married couples need to see, like, you actually can be each other's biggest fans, supporters, and believers in their own unique but together passion and dreams. Where they don't have to compete, and there doesn't have to be this like, I don't know. At times I've watched people be like, well, the bitterness that can grow at times towards a spouse that like is getting to do what they would like to do or whatever versus the other.
Right.
You guys have just done such a beautiful job at mutually being like, wow, we believe in I believe in you, you believe in me, and what's coming out of the two of you is just beautiful stuff,
Thank
and it's
you.
genuine. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely not perfect. I will, just put a little
yeah,
disclaimer out there. I'm definitely learning that when it comes to like figuring out the money side of things or
sure,
some of my creativity, I like to ask him. I'm like, well, what should I do? And then he gives me his opinion. I'm like, I'm not doing that. He's like, well, why did you ask me? I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. And then
yeah,
I get stressed out. So we've definitely had moments like that where he's kind of had to put his foot down in a kind and healthy way of saying like, hey, if you want my opinion, maybe we say like, do you want my opinion or do you just want me to listen? That's
yeah,
kind of become like a recurring theme in when one of us is stressed out and like feel like we need to vent a little. It's, do you want my opinion or would you just like me to listen?
yeah,
And it has saved us from a lot of like, probably big fights.
yeah,
But it's definitely shown me that like when it comes to my business, like he'll be there for me, but he's also
yeah,
like, this is your baby. Like you do what you think is right for it. And I'll be here to hold your hand through it. So
yeah,
it has been really,
yeah,
really growing and a good season.
yeah. And I've had the privilege of personally getting to eat some of these baked goods. They're the freaking real deal. Like
Thank
there's
you.
no podcast family like shout out because I have to. It is like
Right.
I would convince people to go and figure out a way to get some of what but when it comes to that world, like even if they can't get some because you're still doing like well first of all the name will you share just like what's the
Oh
name
yeah.
of your
Yeah.
business for people that can like go check it out and find it.
Sure. Yeah. So it's called There's a Cupcake for That, shortened down
So
to Cupcake for That.
love it.
Just because in every season of life, no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're going through, there's a cupcake for that. And sometimes you just need that little sweetness to
Yep,
bring you some joy. So
yep. So
stems from that. And it's on Instagram, but working on my
yeah.
website. And this is not a plug. You don't have to go look it up.
It's a
But you
I
asked
will
what it was
I'm
called.
gonna be plugging it hard.
Well, thank you.
What's like when it comes to for yeah, I remember last time we had talked about you were just kind of doing like local kind of orders down in LA.
Yeah.
Um is that something you're still doing? Is it or like if
Hmm.
somebody was like, hey, I want some specific
Yeah.
specialty cookies for this thing and like I don't care what it costs, I want to make it happen kind of thing. Is this what
Yeah.
are you like do people can people make orders from other places than LA or
Mhm.
is it primarily local or like how does that work out this stage?
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, I mean, I can do cupcakes, cakes, and cookies and other treats. But primarily for cookies are the only thing that I can ship at this time, cookies
Right.
and bars and things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, I've been practicing all my shipping techniques and I've
Yeah.
sent them to family members in Washington, to family in Tennessee. I've sent them all over the place. So it's looking good for any orders outside of the state.
Yeah.
But that's possible, definitely
Yeah.
possible.
Cool. Yeah. And I just didn't want people to like get all excited and be like, and then oh wait, I have to move to LA to
Yeah.
get some of this.
Yeah.
What
Thank
just
you.
what I want people listening, whether they have any idea who I am or the guest that I'm talking to is, so that through the conversation, if they were to listen through, they would walk away feeling like I feel more encouraged and challenged to get freed up from the things holding me back, so I can be who I was meant to be. For your life, just in some of this you may have alluded to earlier, but just as you think about where you are now in this season, when you look back on something that you feel like has held you back in life from being who you were made to be that you've overcome or are overcoming now, what comes to the top of your head and heart that you would share kind of as like a final encouragement for our conversation?
Yeah. Um, so many things, but one in particular, I think I did touch on it a little bit that um, perfectionism
Yeah.
is something that no one taught me, but I just innately am like, oh, I have to be the best at this. I have to be the best at that. Oh, if I'm doing this thing and I'm not striving to be the best, what am I doing? Such a waste of time.
Mm,
And I feel like I've constantly been rushing in every job I've ever had.
mm,
Um, when it comes to people, family, relationships with friends, I really try to pour myself into those because I realize those are what matter. There are
yeah.
definitely moments in my life where I can look back and there was an opportunity to go to a birthday party or work a little bit longer. And I chose work a little bit longer because I'm like, oh, well, then I'll have more money so that I can spend more time with this person or give them a gift or something. And it's like, at the end of the day, I learned pretty quickly that, not so quickly, I should rephrase that, not as quickly as I would have hoped, that it doesn't matter as much as the people in your life.
Yeah.
And those investments go way farther, and have allowed for healed relationships with, I have 2 sisters and a brother and my parents, just that time spent with them has been the most valuable thing to me that any job I'm replaceable at. I'm replaceable. The moment that I quit, they're going to try to fill the seat. And, it's taken me a long time to learn that, but I know that even if I fail at this, or what I think is failing at this business that I have, I went for it. I took the opportunity that I had, and I'll never regret going for it. And eventually we want to have a family, and that might take a back seat, but it's definitely something where I had to let go of my desire to be perfect, or my desire to be the best at something, and be like, God, I don't know what I am doing, and you know it, and I know it. But if this is supposed to be anything, I have to literally give up all that insecurity to you and trust you, and trust that this passion was put on my heart for a reason. This desire of mine, this is how I like to bless people, is with like sweets. And I've always had a sweet tooth my whole life. My family can attest to that. It's a problem. But, if it's like, okay, but if I can bring someone a couple cookies and that can brighten their day, like, I'm going to trust that was necessary, So just to trust that what the Lord's laying on your heart, really be praying about it. Really be praying that, is it helping serve others? Is it helping, just helping the other people around you? Is it, making a difference in other people's lives in a positive way? It's definitely been what I've been focusing on the last year for sure. And I've been humbled in a lot of ways. Because even sometimes, as hard as you try, people are like, I didn't want to be blessed in that way. You just don't know. You just learn the different ways that people communicate. So,
like I'm allergic to gluten or butter.
Right.
So
and I'm like, cool. Pivot. Yeah. We're like, okay, let's find some gluten-free flour. So, it's just been, there are a lot of things that, I've had to kind of let go of. But I would round this whole thing out to say that the perfectionism and the strive to be on top in whatever I'm working on has kind of subsided, because I know failure's going to happen, and it's going to look different to me than it's going to look to somebody else. So I have to just trust my instincts, trust what God has put on my heart, and go for it.
Yeah. So good. So good, Katy. I am so encouraged personally listening and just processing, and I'm excited to even listen back and chew on just some of the things that you said more, just because there's some real profound stuff that you can tell you've allowed the stuff that you've navigated in life to make you better, and not bitter, as cliche as that is, that like just an even brighter gift to the people around you as a byproduct of trusting the Lord and letting Him do deeper work in you along the way. So you're a gift to our family. You're a gift to Holly and I. You're a pretty ginormous gift to my brother. And we couldn't be more just pumped and happy that you are a part of our family. We are a part of your family. And the impact that you've already made in the short amount of time that you've been around us it's been immense. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And you know what? I have to say, I'm so proud of you for even taking this leap and starting a podcast. Like, that takes courage. That takes ambition. You went for it, and we're just going to keep throwing compliments back and forth to each other. But seriously, like, that's encouraging. When I heard that you were doing that, I was in a spot where I was kind of doubting if I should keep going in my business. And then you're like, hey, I'm starting a podcast where I interview people that have really affected my life. And I'm like, what? Like, that's so random and cool. And like, what? Like, and you're doing it, and what number am I? I don't even know.
I think
30, 40 something?
I think it's going to be 34, 35. I can't remember exactly, but it'll be right around there. Yeah.
You've made it this far. Like, you're doing it, and it's encouraging. So anyway, just to throw it back at you, but thank you for what you're doing and how you're touching people, and it's great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know you won't be able to throw a compliment back to this one, but because you mentioned it, the very first podcast that I did, again, none of this would be happening without Landon, my brother, and the night that he helped me try to do this first one was, we told everybody, our spouses, we'd be home at a certain time, and we weren't. And so, the grace that you showed us that night for being as late as we were, I will never forget that kind of grace that you gave to me. So thank you, because that podcast could have ended that night very easily.
One and
You,
done.
yeah, but you gave some grace. So no, just so appreciate it, Katie, and excited to watch what God's continuing to do in your life,
Thank
in your
you.
marriage, in your business, in the things that He's placed on your heart in the future. So way to go, keep going. People are being impacted by it in a big way, in a big way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
With that, everybody, thanks for listening, and until next time, see you later.